Hey everybody, welcome back to The Approved Cooking. So today I'm going to attempt to make the New York chopped cheese. Now, honestly, I've never actually had one in New York before, but I've watched a ton of videos on how to make them and read a lot of recipes on them, and I think I can do it justice. So without any further ado, let's just get into making this thing. Okay, so to make the chopped cheese, the first thing we're going to have to make is the sub roll for the sandwich. So to start, pour in 1 1/3 cups of warm water into the bowl of your stand mixer. Next in is 2 1/4 teaspoons of dry active yeast, and then just throw in a pinch of white granulated sugar to feed the yeast. Let it bloom for about 10 minutes, and then when it's done, we're going to add in 3 1/2 cups of bread flour. Pour it carefully into the bowl of your stand mixer. Next in is 2 tablespoons of white granulated sugar, a teaspoon of kosher salt, and then last but not least, a 1/4 cup of melted unsalted butter. Pour that all in, and then affix the dough hook attachment of your stand mixer and mix this all together on a medium speed for the next 7 to 8 minutes until you get a nice smooth and consistent dough. It's not going to be overly tacky, as you can see here. It's pretty workable, like it's not sticking to my hands or to the side of the bowl too much, so it's pretty nice to work with when it's like this. So similar to any dough we really make on this channel, take the dough out of the stand mixer bowl and then just work it with your hands into a ball. So just knead it into a nice taut ball, then get yourself a large mixing bowl, coat it with some olive oil or cooking spray, throw the dough ball in and swish it around, cover the bowl in some plastic wrap, and then stick it in a warm dry spot to rise. You're looking for it to double, should take about 2 hours or so. What I always do is stick it in my oven to rise, because that's typically a warm dry spot in your house. After about 2 hours, as you can see here, the dough has risen, so just take the plastic wrap off and then gently deflate your dough by giving it a little punch. Take the dough out of the bowl, and now it's time to start cutting out the individual buns. Now I'm going to make 6 sub rolls out of this dough, so I'm going to cut out 6 similarly sized pieces. However, if you want extra large ones, you could cut them into 4 similarly sized pieces, or if you want smaller ones, 8 similarly sized pieces, but I'm going with 6. So after I've cut them out, I'm going to smooth out the first one into like a rough square shape. As you can see, that's what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to take one side of the dough and start rolling it towards the other side, making a log shape out of my dough. Then I'm going to just pinch the seam in the dough to make sure that the seam is closed. Once that's done, I'm just going to roll the dough with the palm of my hands until the piece of dough is about 12 inches in length, and I'm going to apply more pressure towards the end of the dough so that they taper off. Once that's done, you've done your first bun, and just repeat the process until you've completed them all, just like that. Now, the next thing we're going to do is get a baking sheet lined with some parchment paper, and I'm going to throw down some semolina flour on it. You could also use cornmeal instead, but anyways, transfer your buns to the parchment lined baking sheet, and then loosely cover them in some plastic wrap, and we're going to give these a second rise in your same warm dry spot. Let them rise for another hour until they come out nice and puffy and looking like that. Now these are almost ready to bake, so now would be a good time to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. But before we bake these, get yourself a bread lame or just a really sharp knife and cut a line down the center of your buns, approximately 1/8 of an inch deep, because sub rolls typically have that line down the center of them. And then from there, we're going to give these buns a quick wash with some egg white mixed with a little bit of whole milk, so that it'll help them brown but won't make them overly glossy. Once they're covered, you're going to stick these in your oven preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit and bake them for about 18 to 20 minutes until they come out nice and golden brown and looking like this. Those look and smell super tasty, but unfortunately, like every bread we make on the channel, we've got to let them cool down on a wire rack for a couple of hours before we eat them. So let's skip ahead a couple of hours to when the buns have cooled down enough that we can eat them. So in the kitchen, get your cast iron pan. I have my flat square one here. Throw down some avocado oil, crank the heat up to high on your burner, and then it's time to slam down 2 burger patties. Now I made these 2 out of 80/20 ground chuck, and they're about 6 ounces each, so they might be a little big, but you know, go big or go home when you're making a chopped cheese, right? And then after you've thrown down your burger patties, also throw on half of a large white onion diced up pretty finely, and then you're just going to let these all fry together for like the next 5 to 6 minutes. Don't flip them, don't touch them. You want the burger patties to get a nice crust on the bottom of them. But while they're frying, I'm going to throw a little bit of kosher salt on the patties, as well as some freshly ground black pepper. And then I'm also going to throw some garlic powder on the patties. Now, I know that's not traditionally what you'd throw in a chopped cheese, but I think it'll just really enhance the flavor of them. After about 7 minutes, I'm going to give my patties a flip, and as you can see, there's some nice crust on the bottom. That's what we were going for. So flip them, and then as soon as you flip them, it's time to start chopping these up. So just like use your spatula or the flipper that I'm using here, and then just start chopping them up. This is how you make a chopped cheese after all. You take the burger patties and you fry them on one side, and after they've fried for a bit, you flip them over and you start chopping them up. And as I'm chopping them up, I'm going to get a second spatula in and then just start mixing the hamburger in with the onions. And I'm not sure if you can see this here, but some of the onions are starting to get nice and caramelized and mixed in with the hamburger. And oh man, does it ever smell so good. So I'm just going to keep chopping it up a little bit here and, you know, giving the hamburger a little flip here and there just to make sure that it's all nice and cooked through. But yeah, you just mix this all together, make sure that the onions are nice and co-mingled with the hamburger, give it a few more chops, and oh boy, I can't wait to get into this. So now I'm going to bring all of the hamburger and onions towards the center of the pan, and it's time to throw down some American cheese. Now I'm going to use 4 slices here, and then I'm just going to let this fry for the next 3 to 4 minutes. And while the cheese is melting, go get yourself one of your sub rolls and cut it down the center. And then go get your largest spatula and try and scoop out all of the hamburger and cheese in one go. That's ideally what you're supposed to do. As you can see here, I didn't really do that. There was some left over. So do your best and then get the hamburger and cheese into your sub roll. Now, in hindsight, 2 6-ounce patties may have been too much hamburger for one sub roll, but there's no going back now. We've got one fully loaded chopped cheese. Look at that thing. Now let's go into the other room and finish this off. So what we're going to do is add some toppings and some condiments. So the first thing that you would typically put on a chopped cheese is some shredded iceberg lettuce. So I'm just going to sprinkle some of that on top. Now what a lot of places will do is also put on some big fresh slices of tomato, and I assure you, you will never see me do that because I cannot stand raw tomato. So next thing on is a little bit of ketchup and then some mayonnaise. Just put a nice little squirt of that on too. And you've got yourself a completed chopped cheese. One hell of a meaty sandwich. Look at this thing. All right, so time to taste test it. But first, I've got to try and close this thing. It's pretty stacked, so you know what? Let's just go in and cut it in half. It's messy, it's drippy, but that seems part and parcel with eating a chopped cheese. Look at how delicious this looks. So let's go in, and yeah, that was so good. Just absolutely delicious. The hamburger mixed with the onions, it was so rich and delicious, and it was so cheesy with all of that American cheese on there. This is one hell of a sandwich. It is so delicious, so good. And you know what? Hopefully I did it justice. Like I said, I've never had one in person in New York, but this seems like a pretty decent replica of it. And let me tell you, I really enjoyed making it because of how delicious it was. So you should try making it at home. But anyways, that is the end of the episode. I hope you liked what you saw here today. If you did, why don't you drop me a comment, like the video, or even subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching Idiot Proof Cooking. We'll see you again soon.